I'm going to get us started here. And before I do, I'm going to introduce our two tour guides. So these are two very special people that are going to be leading you through the tour today. And I'm going to read to you a little bit about them. So we have Ceslac and Christy Saunders, two of the project leads on this tour. So Christy Saunders is a project manager at Mascaro Construction, and she oversaw the construction of the building. Chris Ceslac is currently working at Green Building Alliance, but was the project director for the MuseumLab on the Children's Museum staff at the time. So Christy Saunders started at Mascaro Construction as an intern in 2012 while working on her graduate thesis in the field of life cycle analysis and energy modeling by integrating building dynamics, sensor networks, and indoor environmental quality. Christy earned a Master of Science in Civil and Environmental Engineering and Sustainable and Green Design from the University of Pittsburgh and a Bachelor of Architecture at Penn State University. As a virtual construction engineer, she was very involved with the implementation of building information modeling, and currently as a project manager, she's involved in both pre-construction and construction phase services for projects including the one that we're going to learn about today. Christy is a qualified commissioning process provider, a lead AP in building design and construction, and a well-accredited professional. She's also a member of Green Building Alliance and alumna of both our Emerging Professionals Committee and the Sustainability Leadership Lab. Chris Ceslac, as I said, at the time of this project was completed, Chris was the project director at the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh, and now we're proud to call her a member of our family as the VP of Strategy and Impact and Senior Director of the 2030 districts. Chris has devoted herself to sustainable development of this and many other cultural and entertainment institutions, including PNC Park, Penguins Arena, A.W. Beatty Career Center, and the Edmonton Oilers Arena. She also worked on expanding the Carnegie Science Center and, of course, oversaw the construction of this project as well. Chris also is retired from the Army Reserve after 24 years of distinguished Army service, where she served 2 combat tours and earned a Bronze Star while serving as the Chief of Strategy Basing in Afghanistan. So please welcome Chris and Christy, and I will stop sharing now so that Chris can share her screen.
Thank you, Leslie. Is it sharing yet?
Not quite yet.
Yeah, because I did it wrong. Share. There we go.
Yep, there we go. Looks good.
Okay, hold on a second. That's not the right one. Just give me a minute.
I can see your title screen. It looks good.
I know I'm losing my place in the notes though, so that's the problem. I'm going to start over. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
I had it all figured out. And
it always works in the rehearsal.
Exactly. Start over again. There we go. Okay, you can see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Leslie. Good morning, and thank you so much for inviting us today. I am Christy Saunders, as currently GBA's Vice President of Program Strategy and Impact. And of course, before joining GBA, I was the Children's Museum's Senior Director of Facilities and Special Projects. I miss the building, and I'm so happy to give this virtual tour today. I will be presenting with Christy Saunders, who was the project manager on the project. Because this is a Women in Green event, we wanted to make sure to highlight the contributions of the women in leadership roles on this amazing project. Besides me and Christy, we were also led by Jane Werner, the Executive Director of Children's Museum. Julie Eisenberg was our design architect from Koenig Eisenberg. Karen Larimer was our board member and capital campaign chair. Christine Cobley served as the Chief Financial Officer, and Ann Fullingcamp was the Senior Director of Design and Exhibits. The Children's Museum began as a project of the Junior League of Western Pennsylvania in 1983 in the basement of an historic post office building. It is the building on the left, if you can see my cursor, of the old post office building built in the late 1800s with a copper dome. By 2004, the museum was faced with the choice of abandoning its urban roots for a more suburban location with ample parking outside of the city. We evaluated whether to do that or to invest in the community. To guide that decision, we revisited our mission statement. Our mission is to provide innovative museum experiences that inspire joy, creativity, and curiosity. It also includes a statement that we are a partner and resource for people who work with or on behalf of children, youth, and families. Our vision is to transform education through innovative museum experiences. Upon revisiting this mission statement, we decided to stay in the area and invest in the community by expanding the museum to encompass the historic Buell Planetarium next door, which was built in 1938. That's that middle dome right here. In 2004, our architect, who at the time was Koenig Eisenberg, same architect that we used in 2017, the architect joined the two buildings together with the lantern building, which is this building right here in the middle. The lantern's folded planes give it the look of a giant rice paper lamp. It shimmers during the day and glows at night to be a beacon and a nightlight symbolizing care for children. So we like to say we have 3 centuries of architecture right here in a row. The Children's Museum is committed to quality design and firmly believes that attention to aesthetics and practicality creates functional, welcoming community spaces. The philosophy guided the 2004 museum expansion, its development of exhibits, and was the basis of the vision of the Buell Community Park at Allegheny Square, which is right outside our front door. The Children's Museum holds the philosophy that students of all ages are encouraged to find their own answers through hands-on exploration in art and science. They learn, create, and play with real things and real processes that are concrete, relevant, and fun. We developed Make Shop, Art Studio, partnerships with schools and universities to study the impact of our programs on learning. But we aim to do more, to increase impact and create the largest cultural campus for children in the United States. By 2016, we were seeing over 300,000 visitors a year. We also were continuing our mission to transform education through innovative museum experiences. By this point, we wanted to reach a greater audience and we needed more space to do that. At the same time, we continued to think about how to reinvent and rethink education by formal and informal examples of experimentation. We turned toward an adjacent, empty, and neglected building, an old library, to see whether we could turn it into an opportunity. Thus was born MuseumLab. We wanted to lead older children to the edge of critical thinking through learner engagement with beautiful, troubling, and curious elements of society. This library was built in 1890 with a generous donation from steel magnate and industrialist Andrew Carnegie. It is one of the first Carnegie Free Libraries in the US. It was nominated to the National Register of Historic Places in the 1970s. The city, who owns it, renovated it in 1974, but they generally removed or simply covered up all of the original interior ornamentation rather than undertake a costly restoration. By 2006, the library system was distressed with the ongoing cost of operation and maintenance. And then, on September night in 2006, the hand of God reached down and catastrophically struck the clock tower, knocking a 3-ton finial from the tower. It crashed through the slate roof and landed on a Steinway grand piano in the assembly hall. With the building trying its best to hurt them, the library moved out and the building sat vacant for a decade. So the Children's Museum's hope was to develop a more curious, connected, sympathetic, and courageous citizenry. We wanted to create a space for a big experiment and an opportunity to overlap formal education with a non-traditional learning environment. This brings us to the MuseumLab project. It was an ambitious project for ages 10 and up, where the pathway to knowledge is access to technology, tools, and talent. The project included several partners to anchor and activate the space, and those partners included Manchester Academic Charter, a charter middle school for 140 kids, and university partners to provide access to innovative technology. Our partners are also analyzing the potential of the collaboration between informal, which is museum type setting, and formal, which is a school type of learning environment. Our strategies for success included building an amazing team, which was based on trust and past experience, but also taking a risk on new partners. We combined 2 architects, one in California, Koning Eisenberg, which was led by Julie Eisenberg, and one in Pittsburgh, which is Profito Weisskopf, if any of you have had a chance to work with them. And we worked with Tony Patassi. We also worked with several engineers and a sustainability consultant, Branch Pattern, who is also one of Green Building Alliance's sponsors. We started with a sustainability charrette, fully expecting to come out with a goal to be LEED Gold and be done with the goal setting. Surprisingly, our charrette teased out broader goals that tied back to our vision, meaning the idea of developing a more curious, connected, empathetic, and curious and courageous citizenry. We will take you on a tour of the building in a bit that shows you how we achieve these goals, but here's what we mean. There were 4 goals. We wanted to be visible, dynamic, open, and nurturing. So by being visible, we wanted to be a beacon to the community. And so examples of that is that we wanted to be authentic and visible to visitors. We wanted to make energy and building systems visible using light. And we also wanted to comply with or follow nationally known programs such as LEED, Well Building, 2030 District Challenges, and Universal Design. We wanted to be dynamic, which means encouraging activity in the space. Those examples are connecting the spaces and allowing for flexibility within the space, giving occupants control of the space to allow for creativity, and basically allowing a lot of movement. We wanted to be open, and this was what was really, I thought this was fascinating. So we wanted to break down walls and barriers between people. We wanted to help our visitors look at things from a different perspective. So you'll see opportunities to, basically move through the space and go up or go down, and it just sort of breaks down the barriers between different types of people and different types of workers and different types of programs. So you'll see a lot of that, and that was very deliberate. We also wanted to be open in a way that celebrated the art and history of the building, as well as the diversity of experiences within the building. And we wanted the space to be nurturing. We wanted safe spaces. We wanted to design a warm, home-like environment, utilizing a lot of natural light. We also wanted to design private spaces that encourage vulnerability and risk-taking. And we also wanted to design fun and joyful spaces that brought in a lot of natural beauty. But of course, we couldn't do it without an energy model. This is the Green Building Alliance. So we adopted several systems to guide us: LEED, the 2030 Challenge, Well Building, and Universal Design. We commissioned an energy model, and this is what it told us: that it's not enough to simply replace windows, lighting, and mechanical systems. You also need to look at the envelope. This was a challenge in the historic granite building with significant window fenestration, decorative crown molding, and original slate roofs. So we solved the problem with thermoplaster imported from Italy that contained ground up cork, and we smeared it onto the interior of the exterior walls. And Christy will show you that when we get to the tour. And then the other major element that we did that was a result of this energy model is that we wanted to bring in a lot of healthy outside air because of our commitment to education and health. But when we brought in that healthy outside air, the energy use rose in the energy model. So we introduced an energy recovery system to try to keep that under control.
Hey, Chris, real quick, I wanted to mention, later we'll get to it, but I just wanted to point out the red area.
Right here.
Yeah, so we'll get to that later as to why that's like that, but you'll see how this ties back into what we did. And you can really tell the differences of the spaces and why something might be less energy efficient in area. So you can actually tell how this informed our decisions.
Good point. Thank you. So we are thrilled to see that our performance after the first year of operation exceeded the energy model prediction. Our initial model predicted an energy utilization index of about 65. Oh, and by the way, the initial energy utilization index of the building was 156. So it was really high, and it was operating at about that level even when it was vacant. So the city was heating it and cooling it with no people in it, and it was a very leaky building. So all of that energy was just going right out into the air, even though nobody was occupying the building. So we predicted an EUI of 65. By the end of the first year of operation, which was before COVID, we achieved an 83% reduction over the baseline. We had an EUI of about 56.7. It's right there on the screen. So we're pretty excited about that. And what was remarkable about that was that we had also kept the front doors open all summer, the first year that we operated, because we had been because the building had been vacant for 10 years and then under construction for 2. We had a little bit of difficulty convincing people that we were really open for business. So we kept the doors open. We had balloons outside of the door. We were, constantly, come on in, we're open for business. So even with all of that, we were still able to achieve an 83% reduction in energy use. We also received LEED Gold certification and Universal Design certification. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Christy now to lead us through the tour. So Christy, take it away, and I'll advance the slides when you tell me.
Okay. All right, so Leslie mentioned at the beginning that I went to architecture school at Penn State, and one time my professor stated that an architect is really a problem solver, and that we could take that and really do anything. So you'll see us doing all types of different roles in life, so it should be no surprise that I'm not doing architecture anymore, but we really take, I just, that's my passion though, is really problem solving, and you can see it on our screen here. And that this project is probably the epitome of that. We had just problems all over the place every day, something new. So, which, and we were all passionate on the project, which created some very long deliberations about stuff and what the best solution to that problem is. But I really think that passion was what created the best solution to those problems, and that we spent the time to try to figure out what the best solution is. So we'll go through some of those problems as we're going through, but I just want to kind of give that as an intro. So go ahead, Chris. Okay, so this is right when you walk in the building, come up the front steps. This is the front lobby space. So we kind of have these different, just as a precursor, we have these different pictures at different stages in the process. So the first picture is kind of existing the way we found it. And then the next picture we did that's like a historic photo. And then the discovery phase was a year before we did the project, maybe like 6 months or so before we did the project. We did some investigative demo to try to confirm what was there, what we could use, and it just helped the museum inform its final, design decisions as to what we were going to do. So that's kind of the basis for the tour. And then on the next slide, you'll see the final product. So this is kind of what the lobby space looks like now. As you can see, the ribs in the ceiling, we restored those. In the previous photo, the plumbing pipes had been running through those because there was a bathroom upstairs on the original space. So you'll kind of see there's a different play on what items we restored versus, what kind of items we kept as is. So, and trying to play off of a crumbling building versus celebrating a beautiful ruin, which was the design goal of the project. So some things got restored and some things we sort of kept as is. So something else in this photo, the recycled panels in the back, those were the flooring to the library stacks. We reused those to create a screen between the lobby and then the circulation path upstairs. So those were all taken down, kind of reused. There wasn't much refabrication that went into that, just sort of new bolts and put back up. We had to drill some holes and that was pretty much it. So.
And one thing to point out too is, let me go back one slide. So in the historic lobby, there was a staircase But in the 1970 renovation, the staircase had been removed and an elevator shaft had been put into the building instead. So again, for our commitment to being open and breaking down barriers and providing an opportunity to be dynamic and, you know, kind of introduce movement into the space, we wanted to restore the staircase. And we wanted to downplay the opportunity to use the elevator. So we moved the elevator to a more central location deeper into the building. And then we put, you know, we restored and put in a new staircase. So that's what this is all about. And as well as the perforated screen, basically to let the light through and to be able to see the movement behind the screen, even when you're standing at the front desk.
I just wanted to break in real quick because we have a question relating to this slide.
Mm-hmm.
And do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? Not sure if you're able to, if you want me to.
Sure, I'm able to do that. Yeah, the black area that's at the top of the columns, it looks like there might have been some decorative work on there. And I was just wondering if that was removed or if something else was on the top of those columns connecting the arches. Oh, I see.
Yeah, so in the 1970s, they were demolished whenever they covered it up. So they really had the choice of, and I know Chris spoke to the architect that did that project, and he sees it in a different light than we do, which is actually really funny because we kind of, you know, the whole prime, we're like, oh my God, they destroyed this, and blah, blah, blah. And his sort of outlook is that he saved the building, because if they didn't just cover up the items or demo, you know, things that were crumbling instead of repairing them, that they probably would have torn down the building. So he actually feels that he saved it. So, but it's great because now we have a completely different perspective as to what the building is. You really see the bones of that building and the structure that created that plaster, which, you know, teaches the children more as to what the building is. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to the idea that we wanted to be authentic. So if you heard me say at the beginning of the presentation, our philosophy is that we are authentic and kids play with real stuff. We were not interested in trying to recreate something that, like, we felt the building had a story to tell and that we should tell that story. And this is, you know, this is the story to tell. So I mean, obviously it saved money that we didn't need to recreate the capitals, but we also found these shapes of the iron to be really interesting. Just something that you don't see every day because it's usually, has ornamentation around it. Does that answer your question, Anne? Leslie, were there any other questions?
She said in the chat, thank you. No, I think that's it for now, but I think this is great. If people have questions relating to specific things they're looking at, feel free to put that in the chat. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so this is coming through the lobby into the central gathering space. So again, on the left-hand side, we have how we found it from the 1970s renovation. In the center, we have some of those historic photos. You'll see the lead glass ceiling in those historic photos, the colonnade, the fireplace, which were all covered up by these soffits, bulkheads, and wall carpeting. It was just amazing 1970s architecture. And then during our investigative demo phase, we refound those colonnades. There was some paintings that we found behind there. Unfortunately, there wasn't anything left of the fireplace, but that is sort of what we discovered in that area. So now this is what the central gathering space looks like. It's now the Grable Gallery. We sort of recreated the fireplace. The rest of the panels from the library stacks were used to create a modern take on a fireplace in the place of the original fireplace. So you're bringing in a new element to show what was there historically, but we're not trying to make, a faux restoration here. We're just representing the fireplace. So you can see the colonnades of what was left. You'll see in different areas too, where there's some plaster left, some places where we expose the brick. So there was kind of different levels of what we restored things, but we also didn't want to just demo all the plaster off. You know, the historic building was plaster, it wasn't brick. You know, you see on HGTV, I'll just expose that brick, it's great, you know, whatever. But that wasn't, you know, that wasn't the goal. We really had to, when you see the exposed brick, it was either demoed like that already from the 1970s, or we had to do that in order to establish a solid surface. So the plaster was really in rough shape in some places due to, you know, the roof leaking for many years. So we had to demo it back to a solid condition. So that's why you can see, especially in this photo, just random patches of plaster where once we got it to that solid condition, we left it, because that really was the goal, was to leave as much of the historic as we could. So then we put sprayed a clear sealant on over this. So this is all lead paint, you know, from the 1800s. So the lead paint gets encapsulated with this clear sealant, so that, you know, if a kid picks it off, or, you know, what have you, it's fine, because it's been encapsulated with this clear sealant. So we use that on all the places where you see either we also used it on the brick to secure the dust. That was one thing we struggled with this whole project, was the dust. The plaster and the brick just kept making more dust. So the sealant really worked well on the brick too, to keep the dust down and make it more easily cleanable for the Children's Museum in the future as well.
That's great. And I think you just answered a question from Jordan, who had asked if you used a sealant. So that's great. One other quick question for you, Nate, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. I was just wondering if before you started this, if it was classified as a historic building, and if you had any roadblocks with doing demo or any other type of substantial architectural changes.
Sure, I can take that one, Christy. So it is on the National Register of Historic Places, and it is also in a historic district for the city of Pittsburgh. So we had to do, and also we were receiving state money, which put us in a special category to consult with the Pennsylvania Historic Review Commission, Historic and Museum Commission, PHMC. So we did two things. One is we reached out to the PHMC very early in the design and asked them to join us to walk through the building and kind of just bounce ideas off of them about what we had planned to do, to get an early input, so that we didn't, you know, kind of latch on to anything that was going to later be problematic. And they were actually really helpful, because there was a point in time where one of the members on our team wanted to enclose the light well and create another classroom in the light well. So later on in the presentation, you'll see, you know, this nice light well going through the middle of the building, and it probably would have added another 1,000 square feet of, you know, educational space. But the Museum Commission was really advised against it. They said a light well was a key historic characteristic of the building, and we should not do that. So that was great advice, because we kind of, you know, just put that, you know, we mixed that idea early on before our program was really invested in it. And then the other thing that we needed to do was, because it's in a historic district and it's a historic building, we needed to get approval from the city's Historic Review Commission during the planning process. They focused primarily on the exterior of the building, and we were not doing, we would say we were doing a light touch on the outside of the building. So we were really just replacing the front doors. I think we had to add 1 or 2 emergency fire exits, and we were replacing the windows pretty much in kind. So we didn't run into too many issues. I mean, they asked questions, and we had to go back and you know, revise a little bit of our fenestration design to accommodate that, but it wasn't very difficult. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Okay.
Great, thank you. All right, Christy.
We didn't talk about the ceiling. We have to do that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so as you saw in the prior slide, I'm going to go back to that for a second. The leaded glass ceiling here in the original room. We actually, so what was interesting was this leaded glass ceiling had a skylight above it, and this skylight was really leaky and in terrible shape. But we also wanted to create more space for education on the second floor. So our plan was to remove the skylight and put in a solid floor plate so that we had a room above, which was going to then make this room very, very dark with kind of a low ceiling. So we wanted a way to basically create some visual interest and artwork above our heads to replace that old skylight. So we brought in an artist who also has a degree in architecture to design a ceiling for us. And the name of the artist is Freeland Buck. So it was a fellow named Brennan Buck. And they had created this system of basically ceiling elements that were optical illusions. So what they did is they designed the leaded glass ceiling pattern in a series of layers of laser cut fabric. There's 3 layers of fabric that form kind of a net, and they kind of cross over each other. But when you stand underneath it and look straight up, it really does look like a stained glass ceiling. It's really, really pretty. I should have put in a photo from directly underneath it. But anyway, as you move around this ceiling, the different angles show a different view of it. So you can see that he's tried to recreate the arches in this pattern that mirrored the arches here vertically. So you'll see that at all different sides of the elements. So the name of the piece is called Overview, and it's meant to evoke the original leaded glass ceiling. Similarly to the fireplace, which is again not a specific fireplace, but it evokes the feeling of warmth and gathering. And this little flame back here at the bottom is just a programmable LED light behind the screen. We can actually change the colors to whatever we want. We could do Christmas colors. We could do Breast Cancer Awareness Week if we wanted to. But it essentially, most of the time is left on a flicker and just chases, yellow, orange, and black lights around to create kind of a flickering warmth of a flame.
One other thing I wanted to mention in this photo is the flooring.
Mm-hmm.
This is one aspect where in this area, we were able to keep the existing historic flooring and really bring it back to life. So a lot of the flooring was covered with quarry tile or asbestos linoleum. So we removed all of that. And because this is a marble terrazzo, marble mosaic floor, marble tiles, we're actually able to grind it down. So if it's ceramic tile, you can't do that. Any other type of tile, you can't do that. But marble, you're able to refinish. So we actually had our polished concrete contractor come in with their grinders and grind off the flooring. So all of the old mortar and grout and everything that was left on the floors was removed. I think he had to do maybe 5 passes on this floor, but if you do get the chance to see it when we're able to actually go back, it is a phenomenal piece, and I'm so glad that we were able to do that.
Yeah, that was like a last minute change.
Yes, we did that at the very end as well. There was a tiny bit of budget remaining.
Well, there was this period of time where we were over budget, and our fundraising hadn't caught up. So we had this big gap. And then at the end, we got a capstone donation that pushed us over the edge. I'm like, I wish I'd have known that like 6 months ago. I could have done so much more with that, but sorry, better late than never. We mentioned too that we moved the elevator out of the front lobby, but so it's back here behind the fireplace. And that was really a big challenge for Mascaro to figure out, because they had to try to build an elevator shaft in a historic building behind an old fireplace, like in this really sort of tight sliver of space. And honestly, I don't know how they did it, but they did it and it works great. So, all right, moving on. I'm going to get a drink of water, but you go ahead and start, Christy.
Okay, so this is, if you came in the front through the lobby into the central gathering space, this room is to the right. This originally was the reading room, which you can see in the historic photo on the left. And then this arch was also uncovered during, our demolition. So you can kind of see, and it actually had connected through. Half this building is the new Hazlitt Theater. So the new Hazlitt Theater was right on the other side of this partition that you see that we're building on the right-hand side. Their offices were right there. So when we uncovered this, some of the molding was remaining, but you can see that the ornamental piece is no longer there. And, instead of spending the cost to refix that, we preserved it the way that it is, sort of touched it up. You'll see in the final area, in the final photo, that this area is a restoration zone. So, you still get that feel of the historic arch without spending, extra cost on creating all those ornamental pieces back. So you can see the cut line here between the preserve and restore zones. This was something that our painter just loved. He had a set of sketches that we called the preserve restore sketches that showed him what to do and where to create these cut lines. So this made the transition between a preserve and a restore zone more deliberate, because you can see that it was intended to be that way.
Right.
So mainly the way we identified restore zones was if we were using the thermoplaster. So if there was an exterior wall in that zone and we were applying a thermoplaster, then we were already going to have a finished wall in that zone. So it made sense to restore the rest of the space. So this to the right of this photo is the exterior walls that contain the thermoplaster.
Yep. Are there any questions about this room?
Any questions? I don't see any. I'm making a lot of excited comments in the chat because I just love so many parts of this, and I love that transition line. I think it's such a nice way to communicate, both parts of that.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can even see, Leslie, like where the sprinkler line to the right got painted, but to the left was left as, it was like she said, the painter just loved us. We were up to version 7 on the preserve versus restore document. I will point out, just so people know this, like this big thing here in the middle is the tail of a dragon that an artist was brought in to create. So it is a styrofoam dragon. She carved it out of styrofoam, and then she was a mosaic artist. So she's mosaicing the tail right now, and she's not here today, but in this picture, our guests are allowed to come in and try to work with the artist to learn how to mosaic, to do mosaic work. And at the time, I'll do a little show and tell. We had a lot of leftover artifacts from the building where we had to take out some floors. So Mascaro very diligently saved all of these tiles in a big crate so that we would have them to do things with at a future time. And many of these tiles were then used in the covering the skin of this dragon. So the dragon is almost finished, and I believe the Children's Museum intends to install it outside of the building at some point. Probably got delayed with COVID, but you'll have to look for it. It's really cool. It's a really cool feature. All right, moving on. And this is the space activated with our guests. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so this is if you're turning around in that lab space, looking back through to the central gathering space in the historic video and the historic photo, and the next one is what it looks like now. So you can see the remnants of the historic arches up on the top. You'll see those 2 plaster patches. Again, we're just trying, that's a preserve zone, so we didn't recreate the arches there. We just had to make safe. Those were actually ductwork penetrations. Ductwork was going through there during the 1970s renovation. So we just kind of what was remaining, made it safe and sound to be able to put the clear sealant on. So you'll kind of see that as we go through the different stages of what we restored things. But I think this is a great view back through to the other side of the building. The entrance is to your left here.
Right. And you start to get a sense of why the 1970s architect removed these capitals, because if you see up here, these little, what do we call it, kind of like gargoyles, every once in a while they would fall and we would find them. And we were just glad.
I had one in the office for a while.
I know, and I did too. I think it's still over there. So I think, you know, we were lucky they didn't fall on our head. So I believe that, you know, the idea that they had to remove these capitals, probably they were just in a state of disrepair, that they were dangerous, and that's why they took them down. And, you know, for many times we would shake our head and go, I can't believe they did what they did in this building. It's such a travesty. But then I always fast forward 50 years from the renovation Christy and I did, and I think, well, are people going to be saying that about us? Like, why did they remove all the plaster and leave these exposed brick walls? Because these brick walls are not finished brick by any stretch of the imagination. They are very much a substrate, to the point where our superintendent would say you could tell when it was a mason's Monday or a Friday. Because, you know, you'd say, oh, that was Friday masonry work, because it was just like really, you know, crooked and not very well grouted. And then Mondays would be, you know, a little bit more solid. So yeah, I always worry that in 50 years, people are going to be criticizing us for doing what we did, which is why I'm glad Leslie's recording this today, because that way we have record of why we made the decisions we made.
That's right.
All right, I'll take this one, Christy, because this is more what we used it for, because this was like an owner requirement. So kind of about, I don't know, two-thirds of the way through the project, Jane, our executive director, was walking through and she saw all these little nooks and crannies throughout the building. And most of them are from penetrations of either beams or joists or different, you know, pipes that we're going through. And she's like, oh, these will be so cool. We need to put little objects in here to inspire curiosity and creativity. I was like, okay, well, we need some direction, because there's these holes everywhere and we've been filling them in. So we had to create another document that took photographs of all the nooks and crannies that we wanted to, you know, preserve and which ones we wanted to fill. But we have used it for, you know, we will host like art museum camp for teenagers and bring in the teenagers to learn how to manage an art museum and how to curate an art show. And so what you see here on the left is a curation that the Children's Museum has done with one of its artifacts, which is why it's protected with plexiglass, because it's probably historic or valuable. And then a curation by one of our guests. So they've curated it and they've put a little, you know, tab that explains what it is, you know, and they've learned how to basically curate an art exhibit within the space. So it's really neat. It's fun. All right.
Yeah, this is as you head through the central gathering space on the other side of the building. This is actually an addition to the original building. So there was some differences here. This is a little bit newer, 1914, I think, right, Chris?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
No, just a little bit newer. So the existing building had a mezzanine because it was library stacks, right, which you can see in the photo there. So the ceiling height was very low down in the space below because of the, you know, the mezzanine. So the architects wanted to create more of a naturally lit area. You can see how dark it is in that photo from the 1970s. So there was some discussion as to whether the mezzanine should stay or be removed. So eventually we kept a small area for storage, and then the rest of it was demolished. So you can see how much lighter and brighter the space is now. As we were demoing the mezzanine, we discovered these original Carnegie Beams, and I knew that Chris would love them. This wasn't part of the original plan. Again, you always changing. We were always changing things. So these beams were kept to harken back to that historic and what was there. So you kind of can see the outline of the mezzanine that was there, but we're getting a much better space for the Children's Museum to be able to use with that being demolished.
Yeah. Those beams were cool. They're old like bridge steel. So rather than being extruded shapes like you have in modern times, these are built shapes. So you can see the big rivets along them as they were put together. So they're really neat. And then this card catalog back here was donated to us from the Carnegie Library system. So as you recall, this was a Carnegie Library for 100 years, basically. And they have had a warehouse of basically obsolete furniture. And so they donated the card catalog, which ended up being a perfect piece of furniture for a place like a make lab, because you can, hold the screws and the rivets and all the little pieces in there. So it worked out really well. Are there any questions on this?
No questions. Ellen thinks it looks super cool though. Looks great.
Okay, this is where we wanted to introduce light, Christy.
Right. Okay. So we're back in the center. We're kind of going up to the second floor at this point. So this is above where that lead glass ceiling would have been. So that's the as found condition of the light well. And then you can see some of the photos below is up on the second floor lobby. I'll never forget me and Chris's first day on the site. I always love telling this story, but there was a bathroom here. Yeah, right there. That was a bathroom, which had a ceiling height of, I don't even think it was 8 feet. Like it was so low. And you can see how tall the ceilings are there. They're probably 16 feet.
Yeah.
So it was double the height. So we were in the bathroom and Chris is like, I really want to get up here. I want to see what's above this. So she just like busts a hole through the ceiling, climbs up on top of the ceiling strut. And I'm just standing down there like, oh my God, like, what am I getting myself into? So that's just like a little bit of story of Chris, but we went up there and it was just gorgeous. You couldn't believe that they cut off, that ceiling height and they had abandoned half that window. You can see only that tiny portion was exposed in the bathroom. So all of that had been covered up for years and years. So that's how me and Chris's relationship started.
Yeah, I was violating all kinds of mascara
all kinds of safety rules. Don't tell anyone about that part.
Yeah.
So
when we were up there, I was standing up in here and turning around, and what I was seeing were all these arched windows, from the other side. And it was just silly with arches. So we could see those 4 arched windows. We could see this big arched window. This, of course, was all covered up over here where this door, the stairwell is. And then it was all covered, not paneled over, lowered ceiling. So I think we found 14 arches that were covered up. Oh, here's the picture of standing on I didn't even realize what that was, but
yeah, I think that's from that day.
That's from that day, yeah. So we were standing on these struts and you could see all the dust up here, and you could see the arches. It was really neat. You could also see all the flaking paint, which we took care of. Anyway, this is what we transformed it into.
Yeah, so this is the floor of the light well. So we're just above the Freeland buck piece. You can see the glass floor on the sides and the skylights on either side. Up above to let the light down through. And then the metal ceiling also creates that light airy feel. So this kind of creates sort of a winter garden type of feel and preserves that historic nature of the light well.
And this room is the entry to the school. So I mentioned in the beginning that we partnered with Manchester Academic Charter School, and they occupied the second floor of the building. So their front doors are right here, a set of double doors. We're at the top of the staircase here, so this becomes essentially their kind of their lobby before they go to school. But then it also doubles as their lunchroom and as their they can do gym classes out here. They can do presentations out here. One of the clever solutions that our architect, Julie Eisenberg, came up with was this storage system for the folding chairs. And I just thought, she was amazing because she understood how to, well, for the most part, understood how to do things within our budget. Sometimes we had arguments about that, but she would come up with these really clever, simple, low-cost solutions that served two purposes. One, it was sort of an artistic, display of chairs, but it was also very authentic. And then it avoided us having to have a chair cart parked, basically in the room all the time. And it was a way for the kids to have control over the flexibility of their space. So this is where that goes to that flexibility and being able to just grab a chair anytime. You could create a small little grouping of, an intimate conversation, or you could set it up for a presentation.
And good.
Oh, and then also the balcony was introduced again, and that goes to, breaking down walls and changing perspectives. So you think about things differently if you're standing up here looking down on the crowd. It's just kind of opens you up to new experiences.
I was just going to say, from a construction standpoint, this was probably the most interesting part of the building. We did this in a very unique way. We left the existing light well roof as long as possible because we were trying to preserve as much of the plaster below. Because of the differing heights of the building and the fact that it had pitched roofs, there really was no way for us to build a temporary roof structure above that would be sealed at all. So to keep as much rain as possible out of the building and to try to preserve what was there, we left the existing roof. So we actually installed these beams for the roof above that while that was still there. And then we lowered that ceiling down by using these beams. So we attached our chain falls from those beams and lowered the skylight down as one piece down to the floor below. So that allowed us to keep as much rain as possible out of the building during the construction. So this is the second floor lobby. To the right on this photo is the stairwell from the first floor lobby. So this is where those restrooms were, and you can see how beautiful that window is that me and Chris found up above the ceiling. Mm-hmm. So this is another preserve location. So you can see different gray spots in the photo, and that would be where we installed plaster to basically just try to keep what was there from crumbling even further. So if there was a part that was falling off, we demoed it down to sound condition and then try to just fill in that spot so that it wouldn't, fall off even further. Yep. So that's kind of what you can see in this photo. And then also the flooring here is another location where we kept the existing flooring. On this side of the photo from us, from the columns, is a new floor where the stairs were. So that was the existing on the other side. So where you see the concrete patch in there, that was from the bathroom. They had demoed all that to put in drains and plumbing for the bathroom. So we couldn't really save anything there. We saved what we could, and then pieces that we had saved from the new floor, we turned over to the Children's Museum. And then Chris and Jane made this whole layout of a tile rug, which you can kind of see there. So they laid it out over the weekend, and our tile guys installed that, and it turned out really awesome.
Yeah, that was cool. That was fun. We did that around Christmas time. And then Christy, talk about how we took these windows and we cut them down to be openings.
Yeah, so those were, you can kind of see the lintel there, the base of the window. So we cut those down. We used basically giant saws to cut the wall down on either side, and then demoed those out to create the opening to the new second floor plate, because there was no floor there before in the gathering space. So that was another spot where while our mason was trying to make things stable, we basically had to review with him almost every day where he was restoring things and where he was leaving as is. So you can see in that photo where he restored the brick. I don't know if you can point to it.
Right there.
It go up a little bit on the
Oh, right here.
yeah, that's all restored because that's structurally holding up that arch. And then down below where we have all the pockets, we basically just kind of filled it in with grout where we could to keep it stable. So we were kind of trying to preserve as much as what was there instead of restoring it in this area to keep with the design. But, you know, in some cases where it was a structural issue, we had to fix it, so.
And we had, Jane and I and Julie had tons of conversations about, well, do you think the teenagers will try to use these little things to climb up and then get hurt? And so we would try to, you know, fill them in so you couldn't really get a toe hold. And, you know, but we had millions of conversations like that to the point where you were just like, look, kids are going to do what kids are going to do. You just have to keep an eye on them. So, all right.
Okay, so this is the library space. Historically, this is now the charter school side. So if you're in that central space on the second floor, this was to the left. I think Chris pointed out the doors towards that area. So this area was probably in the best condition out of some of the other spaces. All of the dental molding remained, the railings. It really was in good shape, except for, again, the roof leaking in this area, which also caused plaster decay. And it was actively leaking, like some of the other areas, like the light well, where we actually replaced it, so that did not become an issue. But one of the biggest struggle that we had in this area was finding the leaks and trying to resolve them as we were trying to fix it. So, you know, we had to keep repairing areas over and over again until we could, you know, finally determine that the roof was no longer leaking. So this is what it looks like now. You can see most of it is in replace from the bases of the columns to the railing. You can see the extension on the railing that was added to bring those railings up to code and make them safe. So that was a fun way to keep the historic railing, but, you know, make it up to modern day standards.
Yep. It's nice and bright. So just to weigh in here too about some of the sustainable features, all of this lighting, it's LED lighting and it's on a lighting control system, but it's also dimmable. We followed the WELL building standard for lighting to try to reduce glare. So that was really important to make sure we didn't have a very glary space. And again, we mentioned that we have 30% outside air over ASHRAE requirements coming into the building. So throughout the spaces, I don't see any in this room, but there are, it's probably right back here, CO2 monitors throughout the space to measure the CO2 amounts and then to kick on the outside air to bring it in. And we have had some positive feedback from some of our staff that suffer from asthma, where they feel, you know, there were fewer sick days within this building. They felt more comfortable working in this building because of the outside air. So it's nice to hear.
So this is my favorite room, originally called the multi-purpose room, but now it's the assembly hall. So up in the upper left-hand corner is our 1970s photo. And this room was so dark. I don't even think the lights worked whenever we started the project. It was just awful. I mean, there was no window. The flooring was this wood flooring that I think was shoddy construction. When you walked on it, it almost bounced. And then the whole thing was just covered in carpet because they just loved carpet in the 1970s. Yeah. So I think it was actually the same day that we were in the bathroom, but Chris actually climbed up behind the soffit. I did not do this one, but she climbed up behind there to confirm what was left of the historic ceiling, which you can see below. So much higher. I can't remember exactly how many feet, but maybe 5 or 6 feet higher.
Yeah.
And then, so this is where the finial fell down through the roof, which you can see the hole there. So we were trying to confirm what was left of the ceiling and, you know, could we use it or not use it? Or so our original document showed keeping the 1970s ceiling because the consensus was originally that there was too much gone of the historic ceiling to be able, it would be too costly to fix it. When we got more into construction and started demoing in this room, I asked Chris to, you know, rethink it because the 1970 ceiling was not in good shape either. There was massive ductwork above that ceiling that we had to remove. There was, you can see all the penetrations in there, and we were redoing all of the ductwork, and, you know, to bring it up to, you know, today's standards and, you know, to get our sustainability goals, we had to redo all of that. So to do all of that, we would have had to patch a significant portion of that ceiling as well. So I kind of just said, you know, if we have to patch ceiling, why don't we patch the historic one instead of the 1970 ceiling? It's gonna, you know, it's just gonna be so much better. So we ended up demoing that as well. And you can see all of the windows that were covered up and blocked, and now how much lighter and brighter it is. So when we were going through restoring the ceiling, obviously we wanted to keep the cost minimal since that wasn't in the original budget to fix any of the arches or anything. So actually our superintendent came up with this design that kept the barrel vaults around the outside walls. And then we eliminated, originally there was arches around all those arches on the left as well, and that connected into the ceiling.
Oh, sorry, went too fast.
But that would have been very costly to restore those because they were in such disrepair from the finial falling down the roof that we decided to eliminate those, and then we just sort of ran the barrel vault into the wall. So you can see that they were there from the middle pieces that were still left, and it still harkens that historic feeling without, you know, breaking the bank for the Children's Museum. And if we didn't do that, the ceiling would have been much lower and really wouldn't have been as great of a feeling as it is now. And then you can also see that we exposed the brick in this area. This was supposed to be thermal plaster on the original drawings. And as we were demoing the existing plaster, the Children's Museum kept looking at it and was like, that looks awesome. Like, the brick looks great. And because this is an entertainment space, they decided to, you know, keep the exposed brick. We were just going to put plaster over the existing plaster, but it was in such bad shape. It wasn't sound enough to do that. We couldn't do that. So we had to demo the plaster that was there in order to install the thermoplaster. So once we finished demoing it, they just decided to keep that brick. So going back to the beginning with the energy model, that's why this area was red. So I don't know if you want to talk about how that impacted the model.
Well, what was interesting is, you know, I was just, you know, barreling forward with the plan of insulating the walls with the thermal plaster. But every time we had an event planner that worked for the Children's Museum, and by the time we were getting to finish this room, she was starting to sell on weddings. Like, she was bringing people in to sell, you know, book weddings a year in advance. So she kept begging me to keep the brick. She said it'll make the space unique if you just paint it, you know, if you plaster it and paint it white, it'll be sterile like every other, you know, ballroom in the city. We want something different. And I said, no, we can't do that because of our energy goals. And then she kept begging me so many times. I finally went back to our energy modeler and I said, please just run the model with this room not insulated and let me know what the impact is. And it was about 1 EY. So it was, you know, to me, it was a negligible amount of energy impact. So we did what the wedding planner wanted us to do. But she was spot on. It made a huge difference, and it's made the space really nice. It warms it up. It also has a certain amount of acoustic value because we've got the rough texture of the brick, and this room is difficult acoustically, I'm not going to lie. So anything you can do to help with the acoustics was a good thing. And just a fun fact, in the 1800s, this room was a lecture hall and it had a balcony in it. So you can see the shadow of the balcony where it used to be. But that was long gone by the time we came in to do the renovation. Anyway, this is how it looks today. I can't believe they had all these windows were stuccoed over in the 1970s. So they really bring in a lot of light. All right, I think I'll talk about this, Christy, and then you can weigh in with some of your trials and tribulations. So in the northwest corner of the building, there were 3 stories worth of stacks, and they are the traditional, just not really for the visitors, but more for the librarians to get reference books. So there were all these stacks. This is like a patented system of cast iron library shelves. And if you've been to the Oakland Library and the Carnegie Library in Oakland, they have them there too. They had a glass floor. In some cases, they had the metal flooring that we used behind the reception desk. But in any case, we didn't need this space for the operation of the museum. And at one point, we talked about taking out all of these bookshelves and turning it into a classroom. But the Children's Museum being the Children's Museum, every time they walked into this space, the group from the exhibits team were just really captivated by the idea that this was 3 stories worth of bookshelf framing and what could we do with it. And we wanted to make it into a climbing structure. So they reached out to a number of artists to pitch different ideas of how to make it into a climbing structure. And the winner of the competition was an artist named Monsa Allen. She's a Slovenian-born architect whose cultural heritage included lace making. So as an adult, she combined her passion for lace making with her architecture degree, and she started to create these lace structures out of hemp that were huge, huge, larger than life structures. So we commissioned her to come in and create a climbing structure using the stacks as the frame to support it. So she has been working on this for probably a year to a year and a half. She started right around the time we were finishing major construction in the rest of the building. And she continued, we were intending for her to finish in April of 2020 when COVID hit. So she took a break for a few weeks during the beginning of the virus. And then she came back over the summer to finish up. So yeah, it's all hand woven. It will be available and open to the public. I think they're going to open in January, early January, depending on how the virus goes. And you can come in and climb around. So it's really cool. There is a bridge to get into the stacks. So this is kind of your first obstacle. If you're too fearful to climb over this bridge, you're probably too fearful to climb through the rest of it. So you can just stand here and look in and watch people. But if you can handle the bridge, then you can probably handle the rest of it, or at least parts of it. We kept some of the glass flooring, so you can see that as a landing space. And we kept some of the wood shelving from the bookshelves to create little platforms to move around on. And if you look at this picture to the right, this was one of her last contributions to the project, and it is a COVID virus.
One of the things that's cool is that downstairs on the basement level, they made that a handicap accessible. So one of the big things about the Children's Museum is creating something that's accessible to everyone. So as Chris was saying, if you can't walk across this bridge, you can't do the rest of it. And that's probably accurate, but you can access it from the ground floor without really climbing on anything, and just get a feeling for the artistry that happened, and at least, be immersed in this space, which is really cool that they try to accommodate everyone.
Right. So it is first and foremost an art piece, and it's called Gymnasium at the Stacks.
That is really cool. We do have a question from Jordan. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, Jordan?
Okay, now I'm unmuted. I know that for like playgrounds, like children's playgrounds, there can be sort of special requirements for the play structures. I didn't know if for this sort of, play, it's a play thing, if there were any sort of codes or sort of hoops that the artist had to jump through to make sure, like, did someone come out and inspect that?
Yep.
The sound?
That's a really good question. So we were in sort of a weird spot about whether or not we fell under the requirements for playgrounds. We generally tried to follow the spirit of the guidelines for playgrounds. And what we did is we brought in a company that does playground netting, like they do the netting behind home plate for baseball. So you can kind of see, it's meant to feel invisible, but this black panel here is one of those netting pieces. And you can also see here where Mansa is looking out over her space. She's leaning against the black playground netting, which is an extra barrier to keep you from falling. And then the floor, the basement floor, has 6 inches of rubberized flooring installed over it. So that's, and none of the paths of this rope have a fall distance of greater than however many feet the playground guide gives you. I don't know if it's 6 feet or 4 feet, but in any case, if any place where you're going to fall at a greater height than is allowed by the playground code, you will be caught by a rubber flooring. So that's a good question.
And it was also structurally designed. We had an analysis done on the ropes and structure itself, so that it's safe for children. So
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, keep going. We'll get near the end. I think we're doing pretty good on time. So this is, we have two more slides left, Christy.
This is the front entrance. Right as you're the lobby is to your right. The existing Children's Museum is to the left, the original Children's Museum. So on our last day of construction, we went to put in this storefront system on the left side. We really tried to wait to the last minute so that it didn't get damaged. This was all covered by a painted wood that we thought was original. When we went to get that storefront installed, we couldn't find a solid substrate to attach it to. So we had to demo behind the wood to try to find something to attach it to. And that's when our superintendent discovered the terracotta behind the wood. So we immediately stopped and got Chris and Jane to come out. And of course, we wanted to keep this amazing surprise that no one knew was here. There was no photo of this. Notice we didn't have the historic photo to show beforehand, so no one knew this was here. So we had to redesign the whole storefront system to work with what was here so that we could keep this. So I think it set us back 2 months to
2 months. Yeah,
get a new storefront.
I've always had a hard time explaining to my owners, to lay people that aren't in the business, the amount of time from the time you start to design something until it's ready to be built. And this was a perfect example because it was completely out of sequence. It was completely standalone. It happened on the last day of major construction. Stop, turn it back over to the architect, have them redesign it, have it go through shop drawing review and approval, have it go through fabrication again. So, a good 6 to 8 weeks until we could get this storefront installed. Because of that. And it was, all by itself. So people are coming in, they're like, the rest of the building's finished. Why aren't we able to open? Well, because of this. This is why. So luckily we had, not luckily, but we had a lot of exhibits to do anyway to create in the space. So the exhibits team was working to install the exhibits while we were working to finish up this entryway. So they ended up lining up with our opening, but it was initially we were supposed to turn the building over in its entirety to the exhibits team and not be overlapping with each other. But it was worth it. So it's beautiful. And with that, we are finished with our tour.
That is awesome. Thank you guys so much. And if you can even stop sharing, Chris, so we can go on grid view. Awesome. That was so fun. It actually kind of sort of felt like we were there. That was so great. I want to, I obviously have a lot of questions and thoughts. I always do. But if anybody else, at this point, since it's a relatively small group, since the tour part is over, I don't think we have to necessarily do the chat. But if you have a question, you can unmute yourself and also show your video if you want to ask any questions. But while y'all are thinking, I'll ask a couple. I'm always curious about decision making, and I think that you guys explained really, really well, and I've heard a lot of these stories before too, how you go about making those really hard decisions and solving problems. One of the things that I'm always curious about and fascinated by is that thermoplaster that you talked about at the beginning. So I think that was a really creative solution for insulation and an added sort of layer. What was your decision-making process like that? What was your decision-making process like for that, knowing that you had to import it, probably was very expensive and had that sort of upfront footprint of vehicle miles traveled to get across the ocean, but then at the same time, it would be contributing to performance for a long time, after that. So what was that decision-making process like?
Well, I'm hoping Christy can help me remember a little bit. I know that we pushed it back out. We had 2 architects working for us and a sustainability manager, sustainability coordinator. So we felt like we had a lot of brain power to apply to the problem. And the problem that we presented was we need a major way to reduce energy use. We think insulating the envelope is the only way to do it. There are clear goals here. We obviously don't want to, do anything to the outside because it was beautiful and we would have had to go back through planning commission. So we need to do it on the inside, but that we had that crown molding in the studio lab that we didn't want to just like cover up and insulate over. So I know that at that point there were all kinds of weird ideas. Like at one point, someone came forward with this nano bead technology that NASA uses to insulate the space shuttle.
That was me.
That was you.
I'm gonna have.
Well, like I said, we had a lot of brain power on the job.
But I think that's what got us to this point, though. So I think originally we had a couple of different things, but estimated. I think we had 2 inches of foam on the inside. So we were looking at rigid foam and then spray foam originally. And both of those, I think the rigid foam we kind of got away from because we would have been covering up the cornice above. In the rooms, because we wanted to keep as much of the base and the crown molding and the historic parts as we could, and it also would change the depth of the windows drastically, which is something that the Historic Review Commission doesn't like you to do. So I think that kind of got thrown out at the beginning, and then we were looking at spray foam, just basically the same thickness, but just a spray foam, and I think that got thrown out because of the moisture issue with spray foam. So applying it in that manner changes basically your dew point of your wall. And so we were concerned that, the existing walls are breathable. So a masonry wall is breathable, so it dries to the inside. That's how it's built. So when you put that spray foam on it, you're changing that and it cannot dry to the inside. So theoretically, moisture can be trapped in the wall. So that is kind of why that got pushed aside. And then we were kind of like stuck, I think.
And I think to your point, Leslie, the team had a lot of natural curiosity about this building. I think that was evident that people, sometimes problem solving just gets pushed to the side because you have to solve so many problems all the time. It's a constant, just as a daily grind of problem solving. So then the question is, when are you inspired to really use your creative juices to solve the problem? And in this case, I felt like the building itself and what we were trying to do was so inspiring all the time that it fostered a culture of curiosity to look for things that hadn't been used before.
Yeah.
That's the way it felt to me. Now, there were times when the grind really did wear you down and you just wanted to get it done.
Yeah.
But there were glimmers of this curiosity sprinkled throughout the whole project.
And I think that is just such an interesting solution. And I appreciate even hearing, Christy, sort of the other types of solutions you looked for. And I'm, glad to hear about how, you were also considering those unintended consequences of all the different solutions, like, oh, well, we might be able to insulate it, but then we're going to add moisture issues, and that's going to be a systemic problem. So that, it sounds like a great solution. We're just about at time, and I have one more question, but I wanted to see if anybody else had any questions before I ask my last question, because then I want to end us on time. We're getting a lot of comments about how great this tour was. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, Nicole.
So you exposed the windows in some areas that were covered up. Did you replace the glass, since glass windows back then were probably single pane, not very efficient?
They had been replaced. Well, all the windows that had glass in them had been replaced in the 70s. So that was easy. We didn't have any attachment to those. And then the ones that have been stuccoed over in the 70s, the glass had already been removed. So when we took the stucco out, we put in new glass. So we didn't have to, we didn't run into any historic glass, let's put it that way. Unless you consider 1974 historic, which at this point you probably would.
That's a great question, Nicole. And we actually get that question a lot at GBA, a lot of historic buildings that need window, replacement, sort of how to go about that. That's a great question.
So we had to look at old photos of the historic windows and match those instead of
well, except we did find some that had the stained glass transoms, and we were like, oh, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, right.
And then we found others that were movable, operable, and we didn't do that. So we had a lot of flexibility because the 1970s renovation opened it up for us to do more or less whatever we wanted.
Yeah, that's interesting. You had a lot of different types of historical activity in the building. Well, my last question as we close out, and you talked a little bit about this at the beginning, but if you could describe in one word sort of the greatest benefit of y'all being on a female-led team, because this is a Women in Green tour, in one word, if you can describe what was the best thing about being on a female-led project team. Chris, what do you think?
I think the collaboration.
Great. Christy, what do you think?
Passion.
Oh,
I love that you mentioned the passion earlier too. Yeah. Well, thank you so much to both of you. And this was an exceptional tour, even though we couldn't be there in person. It felt like we were. And I just appreciate you sharing the experiences and a little bit of a behind the scenes look. So we really appreciate it, and well done. It's a beautiful project that meets a lot of different goals that were probably hard to pursue together, with both the efficiency, the health, the accessibility, and the historic preservation. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Leslie, for inviting us. We'll stick around while everyone.
Okay. Yeah. Everybody.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Can leave if they need to. And thank you. I'll stay on with Chris and Christy. Thank you, Diane. Thank you so much. I think you can stop the recording.
Thank you.
Great.